At exactly 2:17 a.m., every church bell in Charleston rang at once, even the bells that had been buried for 80 years beneath the earth, and somewhere in the dark, a girl with no name opened her eyes. In 1844, Charleston moved like a quiet predator, polite smiles during the day, whispers at night. Ships creaked along the harbor, carrying cotton, secrets, and human lives like weighted coins in a merchant's pocket. There was no official listing in the public ledger, no auction record stamped by the city clerk, no buyer registered to a name, and yet dozens of men swore they saw her, a young girl no more than 17. Barefoot, unmarked, silent, they said the air changed around her, that conversations died when she walked past, horses refused to move, dogs tucked their tails without command. The strangest part was her eyes. They were not afraid, they were knowing. A dock worker named Elias Moore later wrote in his private journal, "She did not look at us as men look at men or goods look at gold. She looked like a historian staring at the past before it repeats. By morning, she vanished." But that night, something unseen had been purchased. Reverend Malachi Grieve did not attend the docks. He never witnessed auctions. He preached salvation with clean hands and a lined Bible. Yet that same night, he fell to his knees in an empty chapel, sweating, his breath sharp as broken glass. He later confessed in a sealed letter, "She came to me without footsteps. The candles bowed as she passed. I could not see her face, only the knowing inside of it. She whispered a word that does not exist in any tongue I know, and my prayers ran backward." The church records show Grieve requested access to the underground prayer chambers for the first time in his 20 years of service. Beneath the stone floor were brick corridors once used to hide thieves, runaways, and men of undone faith. From that day on, the doors to the lower chambers were never locked, and sometimes long after midnight, the congregation heard two voices speaking in unison. At the St. Dimphna Orphan House, something unusual began to happen. Children started drawing the exact same girl. None of them had met her. None had been allowed to leave the grounds. Yet dozens of drawings appeared across the dormitories, all identical in detail. Long dark hair, bare feet, eyes filled with black stars. Under each drawing were two words written in trembling chalk. "She remembers." Caregivers burned the pages. The children did not cry. They simply began to whisper her name through cracked lips during sleep. No one understood how they knew it. No one admitted to hearing it out loud, but the nuns woke each morning to find footprints leading from the locked front door, all the way down into the cellar, small, wet, human, and resting in ash at the bottom of the steps was a single handprint, made not of dirt but of soot and bone dust. Memory is a fragile thing. When a town begins losing it in pieces, no one notices at first. A baker forgot his own wife's name, a teacher forgot the alphabet past the letter J, a judge forgot why a man stood before him in irons, but they all remembered the girl, not her face, not her body, only the feeling she created. A pressure in the chest, a ringing in the inner ear, a dream of standing on the edge of a pit that had no bottom. Church sermons started repeating. Newspapers printed the same articles 3 days in a row without realizing it. Clocks chimed 13 times at noon, and beneath the streets, under cracked foundations and wine cellars, something moved slowly, as though stretching after a long sleep. Old tunnels, long sealed, began to breathe. On the back wall of the apothecary shop, a symbol appeared overnight. It was made in blood but not smeared, precisely drawn, a circle within a circle, a line through the center and an eye where the lines crossed. When the sheriff wiped it away, the bricks underneath were warm. When it was repainted, it reappeared larger. Soon more symbols appeared across the town, on the inside of church pews, under schoolroom desks, carved into gravestones that had stood untouched for decades. No language matched it, no scripture named it, but Reverend Grieve recognized it the moment he saw it. He called it the Mark of the Remembered, and he whispered with horror, "She is not bound to chains, she is bound to history." A fisherman was found dead near the marshlands, his body twisted in unnatural calm, like someone resting after a long day. Tucked inside his coat was a folded, water-stained map. No modern roads, no names. Only hand-drawn symbols marking a route beneath Charleston, a second city living below the first. At the center, a circle. Next to it, a message written in faded ink. "This is where they hid her from time." Authorities tried to seal the tunnels referenced on the map, but every entrance they bricked up opened again by morning, not broken, unsealed, as if the walls themselves had moved aside. On a stormless night, the town heard singing for the first time in years. Not from the church above, but from below the ground. A choir of young voices echoed upward through the soil, through stone, through bone. They sang a language no scholar recognized, yet every listener understood the meaning without knowing why. We were not lost. We were placed, and she remembers. By sunrise, 3 cemeteries had sunken slightly, as though something beneath them had shifted position. Something very large, something finally waking up. Women across Charleston began to see her not in the street, but in reflections. In wash basins, in polished silver, in the dark glass of windows at night. The reflection was always a moment behind reality, a blink too late, a breath too slow, and then the girl would lift her eyes and smile, not kindly, not cruelly, but with the expression of someone who had outlived the world once already. Several women shattered their mirrors in terror, but the glass never broke. It bent instead. As if avoiding her, old blueprints were discovered in City Hall, yellowed and brittle, plans for a church that was never officially built. Its layout was backward, the pulpit facing inward, the pews pointing outward, the altar positioned directly above empty space, and beneath the final drawing were words written by the original architect. "This is not a house for God, this is a lid." Reverend Grieve knew what rested beneath that unseen altar. He had been kneeling above it for months in silent dread, waiting, listening, praying not for forgiveness but for permission, at exactly 2:17 a.m. Again, 1 year to the minute, the ground behind the church split open with a sound like a sigh. Not violent, relieved. Down below, a doorway stood where there had been only earth, wooden, ancient, etched with the same impossible symbol. From inside came the scent of salt, iron, and something older than language. Footsteps moved toward the entrance, slow and deliberate, and then a voice, carrying the weight of generations, spoke from the darkness. "I was never sold. I was sealed." The door opened wider, and Charleston leaned toward it. The stairway beyond the open door did not feel like it led underground. It felt like it led backward in time. Stone walls, damp and covered in old handprints, stretched down into darkness. Lanterns, long extinguished, suddenly flickered to life as the first men stepped inside. Their flames burned pale blue, like winter trapped in fire. What lay below was not a tunnel, it was another city, a hollow mirror of Charleston carved into the earth, streets made of packed soil, foundations of homes that had never existed above ground. Pews carved from rock, rows of tiny, perfectly shaped beds lined up like offerings, and in the very center of this hidden world stood a chair, a single chair made of dark, polished wood, still warm. They understood then. This place had never been abandoned. It had been waiting. Names began to surface, not from dusty books, but from whispered confession. The founding families of Charleston, respected, wealthy, devout, had signed something long ago. Not a contract with ink, but an agreement soaked into soil and bone. Their prosperity was never free. It had been purchased. They had been told the town would thrive if a keeper remained beneath it, a living key, a memory buried in flesh, holding something unspeakable in place. And every generation, they passed down the duty like a disease disguised as tradition. Select the girl, erase her name, bind her to the chair, seal the door, except this time, the seal had failed, and the girl had remembered. Old Latin texts, stolen from seminary archives, spoke of a being known only as the rememberer, neither spirit nor woman, neither living nor dead. It took the form that history had wronged the most. It carried the memories that time tried to bury. It wore the face of the forgotten, and it was never meant to be enslaved. It was meant to sleep. The men who bought her had not purchased a person. They had imprisoned a witness older than their bloodlines, and now it was awake, still in the shape of a girl, still with bare feet touching the soil that betrayed her. But its eyes had become something else entirely, a library of every buried scream. The moment she stood from the chair, the town above shuddered. Windows cracked outward, church bells split down the middle. Ink in every book bled into nonsense. People collapsed to their knees, choking on memories that were not theirs. They saw ships full of bodies, fields watered with silent deaths, children buried without graves. Lies wrapped in hymns. She was giving the land back its voice, and the land was howling. Some tried to beg her to stop, but her mouth never moved. The truth entered their skulls without sound, uninvited. Unending, unforgiving, the singing returned, louder than before, from beneath the earth, from inside the walls, from inside human chests. It was not children who sang those nights. It was memory itself, given breath through stolen lungs. Men and women opened their mouths in harmonies that had never been taught poured out. Languages erased by time, now reclaiming space in the air. The song had no melody, only meaning, and its meaning was simple. You cannot build a life on buried lives and expect silence forever. The wells ran black. The river moved the wrong direction. Rain fell upward in certain corners of the town, drifting from roofs back into the clouds like it was ashamed to touch the earth. Sailors swore the ocean was retreating from the harbor, inch by inch, as if Charleston no longer had permission to exist beside it. The girl walked calmly through the streets for the first time in a year. No chains, no guards, no fear. Every step she took healed something and cursed something at the same time. Flowers bloomed and rotted in seconds as she passed. Concrete remembered grass. Grass remembered bones. Before the whole town, before God and the sky and the trembling ground, Reverend Malachi Greaves stood and confessed. "We did not worship God," he cried. "We worshipped comfort, and we offered her as payment." He dropped to his knees before her. "You were not damned, child. You were chosen to carry what we would not look at." For the first time, the girl spoke with a human voice, "And now you will carry it too," and the weight of a century pressed into every spine at once. People could not stand. They understood. They understood everything. Behind the old cemetery, a second doorway formed from the soil itself. This one glowed from within, faint and gold, like morning memory. She stood between the two doors, one leading into the buried nightmare, one leading unknown. The town held its breath, not because they expected mercy, but because they finally understood consequence. She turned to them, eyes no longer black but full of reflection. "You made me a lock," she said quietly. "Now you will be the door." When the sun rose the next morning, the second Charleston was gone. The tunnels sealed, the symbols faded, the chair turned to dirt, but something else had changed forever. Records appeared that had never existed, names of the lost, the stolen, the erased, now written in city books as if they had always been there. Gravestones rose overnight with correct names etched in them. Families woke up knowing stories they had never been told. The town did not forget. That was her final gift, or her final curse. No one knows where she went. No body, no grave, no whisper in the dark. But even now, people in Charleston say that some nights, when the air feels heavy with memory, they see barefoot footprints at the edge of the water, small, unafraid, leading into the sea, and church bells sometimes ring at 2:17 a.m., even the ones that no longer exist.